introduce him, but I'm going to ask him to introduce himself now because he'll do a much better job than I will.
I'm one of the founders of Lingoda. We do something very similar. We teach languages to people and we do it in live classes. And we have been doing this for 6.5, 7 years ago. And we started with German and now have many languages: Spanish, German, English, French.
So why did you start with German?
Yeah, I guess like Fabian, the other founder, and my brother, like I think we come both from Germany, and it was like pretty apparent that this would be. We were the teachers, like the first lessons were taught by us. So yeah, it was pretty obvious that we would start doing it like this.
So did you have curriculum when you started, or as the two of you teaching? You don't have teaching backgrounds, or?
No, but yeah, kind of like we started with just pictures, like putting pictures and talking about the pictures. And then we were buying books, like books from publishers, and we sent them to our students. And then we would have classes with books open. But yeah, none of the publishers wanted to allow us to put them as a PDF. Everybody was hanging up the phone right away. And then we started building our own curriculum. And yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how, so one of the interesting things about, I did this a month or two ago with Babel, which is a very, very different sort of model from what my company Chatterbug does, but yours is actually much more similar to what we do, of connecting with...
You're a little bit in the middle, right?
Yeah, a little bit in the middle maybe. Yeah. But connecting with real people, right? Tell me a little bit about how you started developing your curriculum, right? Were you doing it, you saw what was available and you started doing it yourself, you started hiring somebody to do it, you had the tutors that you were hiring sort of come up with the curriculum, like how did you start that process?
That's a good question actually. We had books for a long time, and then we started putting just slides together, and then we had like this wonderful boy there who was leading our education team.
Has everybody seen The Wonderful Boy?
Yeah, he's very outspoken. He's going to disrupt us like every now and then, I think, during the talk. Yeah, and then we started, and the approach was to have something at first, and then we were learning. The idea was to not do what publishing houses do, to make like a big one of effort and then get everything done, but we were more like iterative, right? So the idea was that it was a process where we would touch every learning material like many times, and this is what we are still doing today. And now it's pretty good. We actually published it on Amazon. Like one guy from India actually bought it. And yeah, this is how we got started. And now it looks very different actually to normal learning materials. Like when I show this to people, it's so good now, and it's so catered to like an online classroom environment for like a virtual classroom, that we are very, very happy that the publishers back then would not give us a license to copy the material. So
I do want to go back a little bit to the beginning of the company, because I'm curious as an entrepreneur, like what's it like co-founding a company with your brother?
Yeah.
And then how...
No, it's very nice. It's very nice. Yeah.
And why start your own company? Like, why around language learning? Why, like, what was the reason that you were like, this is a thing that we need to create and we need to invest our time and maybe money in?
Yeah, it's probably less romantic than you would think it is. Like, I was working in language, like in offline language schools, and I was first like responsible for the marketing for like the younger people there, and then I was building my own department like within the company. And we basically sold like these work and travel products. I don't know if you're familiar. Like a lot of people in Germany after high school, they go for 1 year to Australia or Canada or so. And then the idea was that we sell them language courses and then like help them to do this. And then for me personally, the reason was that like I was doing this for like a year, and then after 9 months it was like very, very profitable, yeah. And then I was like, wow, I should not, like be working for somebody else. So I saved a lot of money, and then I took like a 2-year gap and was trying to found a company. And We had like a couple of tries before that also didn't fail. We had like a couple of ideas always like floating around, and then the language one stuck. It was something German at the time, you know, was becoming very popular because of the strong economy. A lot of people were migrating, and yeah, and we put this really ugly page online, you know, where you could like put the schedule. The company back then was German on Skype.de or something like this, and there was just a flag, and then you could put your data, and the rest was manual. And then we put like an AdWords budget of €5 a day, and then people came, and then it started basically from there. Yeah.
How did you convince your brother, or did your brother convince you? Actually, before that, what were some of the other companies that you didn't do?
We had like the one that sticks out is like luxury travel. Like we had this idea of, you know, my background is also in tourism, and the idea was like to do really catered, like very special, curated traveling for like a price point like of €30,000 or something like this per trip. And we did a lot of offers, but like for some reason nobody trusted us to do it. So we got a lot of traction, but then like we ended up never selling anything. And then yeah, I cannot even remember the other ones. Yeah.
And so did you bootstrap? Did you use your own funds to kind of start the company and start paying yourself at some point, or did you raise money from somebody?
Yeah, like interesting. Like we were starting in London. We were actually both living in London at the time, and then we started pretty startup-ish. So we hijacked one of the rooms of like London Business School where Fabian used to study at the time, and then we just put a sign. So this is our room now. and then we were both going back to Germany, and we were also both going back to Berlin. It was like unclear at the time whether we would continue or if we would get like real jobs again. Fabian would get like return to McKinsey again, and I would like do something else. And then like we were not familiar actually with like the concept of like selling equity of your company to people. And then yeah, like you talk to people, and then like wow, you want to give me this money to build the company? That's great. And then like this became like a little bit more professional. Yeah.
So you did raise money?
Yeah, we did raise like seed funding in the beginning.
How big was the company when you did that?
Very small. I think we just passed like 100 hours per week. Mm-hmm. So we did the step of like not teaching classes just by ourselves.
Somebody has a question?
So we did the step of already like giving this to to employ other tutors, so to say.
Yeah.
And then at this point we raised the funds. Yes.
And so from the beginning when you guys were doing this until now, maybe you can tell everybody a little bit about how Lingoda works now and how it's changed from when you first started. Was it 8 years ago?
No. We started something in 2012, October, and then the Lingoda website, not as you see it now, but with the name Lingoda, was like 2013. Okay. So yeah, six years ago.
From then until now, I guess explain a little bit now, like just to the audience how it works for people that haven't used Lingoda, and then what, you know, go back to how it originally was and what that transition looked like.
So how it's now is you can buy like a set of group classes or private classes, and then you can log into our platform, and it's very, very simple. You see the learning materials that you can download, but the heart of it is like that you schedule like a class. And we have like a mechanism that shows you classes that are somewhat relevant to you. So it's not like you would start with a book, you start from page 1 to page 100. We're a little bit more flexible with this, but we always, you know, make a choice of what we show to you, and then you can pick what's really relevant for you. And then the basic idea is that you can learn 24/7, you know, like Christmas, 3 o'clock at night, you could learn a Spanish in a group class. And this is how it works now. And we started with just German, obviously. We use Skype as a technology, and therefore we also only had one-on-one sessions. And we had teachers that were not real teachers. You know? So we just put people that were like in their studies, and then we matched them together. And this changed, yeah. Like we now believe that we should, you know, only employ like the best educated teachers. And we have group classes now. So you don't only have one-on-one classes where you keep like the teacher, but you can also like choose group classes. And yeah, we think it's a better translation of what's happening in the offline world, and it's a little bit more affordable, but at a very, very high quality. Yeah?
So I mean, actually, I'm curious about this as well. We've talked about this a lot in our company of the pluses and minuses of group classes versus sort of one-on-one classes.
Yeah.
Like, how do you find that give and take between not having as much time to actually be able to speak, right, as opposed to watching videos or something where it's not interactive, and having less or more time, like more time in a group class versus less time on one-on-one? Like, do you find that that's 2 hours in a group class where you're speaking half the time is more or less valuable than 1 hour in a one-on-one class where you're speaking, you know, the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, there's studies about this, I guess, but I mean, I guess for some certain types of lessons, like private class would be more effective, but I think that the curve, you know, of the effectiveness, is not too steep, you know. Like if you share the resource of a teacher, I think you will still get a lot of the class out of the class. And we did like a lot of experimenting around this, and we ended up, you know, coming to the conclusion that, you know, up to 5 students, it's really very effective to do this in a group class. And actually, you know, I don't know, like you took a lot of classes yourself, right? Like after like a day of work, you know, it's very intense, right?
Yeah.
To have like a private class, and group class is just as effective. Like, it's very anecdotal because we don't do certifications ourselves, but you know, you take 100 group classes or 100 private classes, you're gonna have like a similar level of language.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is how do you measure internally students' progress?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like when we started, coming back to you know, like qualified teachers versus non-qualified teacher, the thing that bites you a little bit is that that as soon as you connect 2 people, you know, like in any setting, like one-on-one on Skype, like what's the most likely outcome is that they're really going to like each other, yeah? And then the student will always rate the teacher very, very highly, yeah? So I, as a non-teacher, you know, like teaching classes, back in the days, you know, I always get 5 stars. I had like an average of 4.9 stars, but obviously I was not very effective in teaching stuff. One of our mentors, he's like in the board of directors from Lingoda. He said this very, very early to us. He said, guys, like, don't look at, you know, how much people like your teacher and stuff like this. Only look at the learning progress. And the reality is that this is a transition that we are still like doing. We have clustered our curriculum now much more competency based, and you know, like in this class you have these 3 skills that you learn in this set of vocabulary, and you need to make a tick mark for those things. Like otherwise your learning experience might be enjoyable, but it's you're gonna struggle after some time. I'm actually learning Spanish right now with italki. And this guy, yeah, he's very nice, Luis.
Hold on, I have a question.
Sure.
Why are you learning Spanish with italki?
I don't know. Like, I think it's a really cool product.
You offer Spanish, no?
Yeah, sure. I also learned Spanish. I also learned Spanish with Lingoda once, of course. But testing like words,
no.
And you know,
if you want some coupons, you can use our platform. We can exchange notes.
Sure. We have to speak German later.
Yeah.
We have a 25% discount for you. But where was I? Like, what was it? You were insulting me.
Yeah. No, I don't remember. Does anybody remember what the original question was?
Yeah, progress.
Right. So is this really cool like person? He's really nice, you know. But he for 4 or 5 lessons he always brought pictures of Tom Cruise. Yeah, in different, you know, like he was doing things. He was on the train, and then like we talked about Tom Cruise being in these different positions. Yeah, and then what was really nice for like 15 minutes, you know, it became awkward after 45. And then after 5 lessons, it was just, you know, okay, I don't want to talk about Tom Cruise anymore. I still have 2 credits left. I'm gonna use them at some point, yeah.
Wait, but so I think the question was how do you measure skills or sort of competency? Is it Tom Cruise based?
It's not Tom Cruise based. We actually, we can talk about it later. But we have the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, which is like the Bible that everything like comes out of, and it's pretty straightforward. It's like a manual on how to build a curriculum, and this is how we do it. So,
are you doing things like reviewing students occasionally, spot checking people or something, and saying like, we think that they would pass, a Gotha B1 test or something at this level, and how many hours it sort of took them to get there?
So the problem is that this data is somewhat like a little bit anecdotal, what is really helpful at the center of developing this is like the teacher feedback that we get. So we have really, really good teachers, and then after each class, like we actually pay them like some money, like to give feedback on the presentations, and like if 20 teachers have given feedback on the presentation, like 5 things come up, and then you just improve them. It's pretty straightforward, like this exercise takes too long, or like this is too wordy, or So we trust the teachers to do that for us.
So I'm curious, at the scale, you guys are at a larger scale than we are. Are you doing some sort of A/B testing and saying like, if we teach students like along this curriculum path, they'll progress faster than if we go down this other path?
Yeah.
Or
so at the moment, we are not there yet. Like we are doing some stuff to A/B test things, and we actually had like a couple of really interesting projects where like we were teaching German to like a group of like medical professionals, and then we had 125 students learning with Lingoda German, and then we had 120 something like learning with the Goethe Institute, and then we educated them from A0 to B2, and then we sent everybody to Goethe, and so at this stage, which is like a little bit of time ago, like we were actually outperforming the Goethe Institute with a similar amount of hours. I think we were a little bit higher, but so like this is some data that we can rely on, or that we can look back on as like a scientific test of it. Other than that, like we get feedback from students, like they're really learning a lot with Lingoda, that they like invest like up to 5 hours every week. And we are very, very close to them. Yeah, so the teachers, but also to our team.
So having all of these students go through, all of these hours of learning, what's something in the last 6 or 7 years, that the company's been around, that you've learned about the language learning process that maybe you didn't think at the beginning, or like something new that you've seen from the students that wasn't intuitive? That wasn't intuitive.
Now we can go back to Tom Cruise actually. Like when we started first, like with the learning materials, like somehow when you explain how to describe a person or something like this, we had this. We put American movie stars there, right? Like how you would do it, because everybody knows them. And then it was really interesting because we have this global like audience and the global like base of clients. And then they were reporting back to us that like this is not culturally appropriate, and this was like a really like interesting like learning that we made, and also like bringing people in a group class sounds like a really, really like nice idea. We have this person from Brazil, and then from Saudi Arabia, and then from Germany, and they learn German together or English, and the reality is that it's really, really nice and people appreciate this. But you always also like you get to a point where there's like cultural like distress. We have this one story from our favorite student Oscar. Oscar took every class that we ever made like twice. I think he was Spanish native, but at some point he took Spanish classes as well. And he was in a class with like a gay German teacher who was sitting in Hamburg, and then there was this super conservative guy from Saudi Arabia, and then there was one more person, but yes, exactly, there was somebody from Israel who was in the military, And then, you know, they had this class together, right? And then totally, you know, the teacher quit. It was really, really terrible, yeah? But you know, things like this happen. We also had a heart attack once, like during a class. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's pretty weird, right? Like, we talked to this person. And
was it due to the tutor?
No,
No,
I don't think so.
That was so stressful.
He was okay. He was okay afterwards. Like he said, like okay. I think he even rated the class really well.
So you guys do both one-on-one classes and group classes.
Yes.
What's the sort of ratio on
Much more group classes than private classes. I would have to lie to you, and it's like for the learning language that you would pay, it's always a little bit different. Also per country it's really, really different. So Switzerland, obviously, you have a higher GDP and a higher willingness to pay. I think it's a little bit more private classes, but overall it's clearly group classes, more group classes.
And you think that that's more because of the willingness to pay, because of the sort of price point?
I think there's like, could be, yeah, I think this is the obvious reason, the elephant in the room. But then there's also this aspect of flexibility. So if you have like a one-on-one teacher, you always need some time to match those people, right? Even if you get like really, really good at it, you would still have a ramp-up time of like 6 hours or something like this. But with group classes, you know, like as soon as you have like a teacher and a student match, you would be able to you know, like add more students to it. And I think this flexibility of, you know, like coming home from work, you know, and either you are at your desk at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock makes a big difference. So like I think there is this this quantity and the ability to do this on short notice that people really appreciate. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about, so I mean, one of the things that I am really interested in this series, like I'm trying to talk to a lot of people in Berlin that are working on language learning startups or technology-based startups, is the role of technology in learning languages, right? Like this is something that's relatively new.
Yeah.
Like talk a little bit about how technology has helped your company help people learn languages.
Sure. So first of all, it's like a piece of infrastructure, right? Like before, you couldn't talk to people that are far away from you, and now you can, right? Like, and you can do this in good quality with video. So like, I think this is really apparent. And then like our very first client, or one of the first clients was like a guy working on an oil rig, right? So he couldn't learn anywhere else, and we put like a piece of infrastructure in place that enabled him to learn. So like, first of all, it's like this reach, which is now there. And secondly, like we do believe that the teacher is at the center of things. Yeah, we don't believe that they are going to be replaced, but there is some interesting aspects on how like a teacher can be helped. Yeah, so for instance, like learning vocabulary is something that a teacher should not like spend time with, but at the same time you can create technology or like co-work together with like existing technology to make this to help the student and both the teacher. And then in the beginning we were thinking very much that we would have to create our own like video chat technology, and we had like these experiments with like a WebRTC room that we built ourselves, but like we extracted ourselves a little bit like from the situation, and you know, the stories to investors. So it's, you know, like in 2010, you know, the iPad was released, you know, and with the iPad you had this adaptation curve of people like adapting to video chat technology, right? And then like 10 years earlier than that, you know, like you had an analog modem where you know, you need to pick up the phone and then put it on this thing, and then you really, really slow internet connection. And we are now in 2019, so 10 years later than that, and everything is changing again. Yeah, we use now Zoom, which is like the best technology available for connecting people in groups and also privately. And I've been like 2 weeks ago, I've been at like a virtual reality escape game. Have you ever done something like this?
I've done virtual reality and escape games, but not.
Yeah, you have to test it. Like it's at Klosterstraße 62, and it's amazing. It's amazing. You have this big pack on your back, and it's kind of hot. And then you but it's amazing. Yeah, you can pick up things. You can throw, like, there's an ananas and like a pineapple, and you can pick up the pineapple and throw it. And it feels like you're picking up the pineapple, yeah? I don't know what this means for language education, yeah? but obviously you could order a coffee like next to the Eiffel Tower
from Tom Cruise.
Exactly. Or you could put yourself in a business context situation where you present in front of people, and I think it's really amazing, And what we believe is that this is going to be like disrupted multiple times.
No. Well, so I mean, I was going to ask, like, as you were talking about this, because this is something that I'm really interested in as well. I've done a lot of VR stuff. I pre-ordered the Quest. I'm really excited about the fact that this Quest is.
I bought the Oculus Go just after that. Like on my way home on the bike, I bought it. Yeah.
It's a fascinating technology, and it's really interesting for immersing somebody into an environment. That's a lot of the thing about learning a language, right? And why I think both of our companies, as opposed to Duolingo or Babbel or something, are trying to connect with human beings.
Yes.
Is to try to get you to feel this experience that you're going to feel when you do try to have a conversation or communication with somebody in a way that's real. And VR, I think, is maybe an interesting future technology of saying, okay, I actually feel like I've been in this situation ordering in a restaurant or something before. And so I guess I'm kind of curious from this context, because I've been trying to think about this as well, and I'd like to steal your ideas. How, because we do feel that I think we both feel that human beings are important in this space, right? Of being able to communicate with people, and in VR that's a little bit more difficult, maybe, right? Of like inserting a human being into sort of a VR space and having it be realistic. So what do you feel in not just in VR, but I mean in general, right? Is the separation between where computers or technology is really good at helping somebody learn a language, and where human beings are really good at helping somebody learn a language?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said, I think there's there's some space where it makes totally sense to apply like all of these buzzwords, like AI and VR and I think there's an argument to be made that this is something very, very useful, but like we believe that it should always only support the teacher. There's many ways to look at it, I guess. Like one way to look at it is like a teacher spends 60 minutes in a class, so what is he doing, should he, correct somebody's pronunciation? Probably not, yeah? There's good technology that tells you that the TH is terrible, yeah? And I think as soon, and all the knowledge stuff as well, yeah? So if you learn grammar, certain rules can be taught to you by examples and stuff, and vocabulary is another one. But as soon as it comes to the application part of it, so you taking the vocabulary and the semantics and then apply this to order a coffee and then react to something, my perception is that it will not happen, that the teacher is going to be replaced in the next 25 years. But it's a bet in the end. I've done the Skype call where you're being translated as you speak, and it didn't work so well. But maybe it works at some point. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me as well, because I get asked this a lot, and I've been thinking about it a lot as well. And one of the things that, I don't know if you've ever done simultaneous translation with a human being, or you go to Tokyo or something, and there's somebody walking around with you and translating for you, but it's a horrible experience. Even a human being there in real life, not speaking the language yourself, in any even in the best context, which having a human being doing that for you is probably the best possible context, right?
Yeah.
At best, the computer can get that good at it, and it's still a very poor experience.
Yes, I agree.
And so it's sort of interesting to me, but from a learning perspective, I guess figuring out what the difference is between empathizing with the person that you're speaking with, or being able to go off script or talk about things that aren't pre-programmed or things like that, right? That's what's interesting to me about language learning. And so it's sort of fascinating to figure out how can we augment that? How does technology help with vocabulary or grammar or something like that? Yeah. And then human beings make it interesting, right? Make it worth having a conversation, I suppose. So I guess that kind of leads into a question for you about what you guys find, as maybe as a company or maybe you personally, about the importance of learning a language. Why are you in this business? Why do you think it's important to help somebody learn a language?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's important. Like I've been in the situation like myself multiple times, being like in a foreign country, or like I was going to Australia also after my high school year, and it's just really important and enriching to learn a language. Yeah. So whatever you know, like your horizon is, and what you know, like is available to you as information and things to do, you know, like it just becomes bigger with learning a language. So I think everybody speaking multiple languages per default has like a more worthwhile living life. Yeah. In terms of, you know, like going back to the reality, like a lot of people are learning like a language for migration purposes, or they're learning a language to advance in their career in some shape or form, you know, like doing the IELTS or so, or like you do this because you want to enter university, right? So these I think are very tangible reasons why people learn a language. And then, yeah, beyond this, you know, like if you have an international relationship, then that makes total sense to learn the language as
well. What do you think, looking back at sort of a lot of the students that you've had and, over the years, are some of the biggest misconceptions that students come into learning a language with?
Well, I think learning a language can be a somewhat frustrating process, right? So like in the end, it's something very binary. Like either you can like watch a movie in French, or you can't, right? Like, or it's like really like tiring for you. I think the perception of people like achieving like these goals like very, very early can be something that's like very natural. It doesn't apply only to us, but to everything, to all the language learning options. Other than that, I think people need some time to understand the concept of learning a language online. Most of them obviously have used Skype before, but you know, like, and there's a whiteboard, and then you meet other people in a group, and then there will be a teacher, and you can choose a topic. Like people need to touch this somehow first, right? So there's like a conception of online where this is something not scary, but you know, like when I joined the class the first time, you know, like I still have this feeling inside of me that it's like a little bit funny, you know, you meet a stranger online and you're going to talk for a long time. I think there's this barrier, you know?
So I guess if you say you're learning Spanish, where are you in your Spanish learning?
I haven't learned for some time. I put it like it was just recent, but like it was this year that I took my last class, but it's like some time ago.
No.
I studied in Spanish at some point, you know, like I just need to like restart it. But probably I'm a B2 or something like this.
Oh. So going back, if you had to learn a new language from scratch, this is always to me a really interesting question to ask, especially founders of language learning companies, right? If you had to learn a new language from scratch and you had a really high motivation to do so for whatever reason, how would you do it, right? I mean, the easy answer is use my own software for that. But like that aside, like what you've built aside, or you know what we've you know built in our own lives, like in the future, what do you see as the ideal process for learning a new language?
I probably wouldn't use Bubble, you know, like it's something that it's something that's really nice. It's very nice to, you know, like embark on the journey of it, but like I think it gets like somehow like you get to a threshold very early where it's just it's probably very, very frustrating. I think that the reality is that there's a really long process. Yeah, anybody who learns a language like typically doesn't do this in half a year, but it's like a journey, you know, like 5 years plus. And I also think that there is like natural like ups and downs of your language learning journey. So you do a course, and then you go there on vacation, and then afterwards you learn a little bit, and then you maybe like read a book like that you really like as a child, and then you know like you start reading this in this language. Maybe you watch like a Netflix series to do this. So I think the ideal process is really, really difficult to grasp because it's like such a long thing and you do so many things. And I think a mix of those like is very healthy. And starting with Bubble, of course, like this would be very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, to be fair, I think when I did this with Tomas last month, that he said essentially the same thing, right? Like they're good at getting you to A1 or something, right? And then after that, like you have to bring in other things at the very least.
It's very beautiful if you think about it, right? It's so accessible, and they help so many people to get started. Yeah.
Like lowering the barrier of entry of sort of getting into it. So I guess maybe to phrase this a different way, if somebody came to you and was like, I don't know any German, right, and I need to get into this university or whatever, so I need to pass a B2 or C1 test in something short, 6 months, 8 months. Like, how would you, is that not short? I don't know. It seems short to me to get to that level. How would you recommend that they approach that problem, given the tools of today?
I mean, like, I think obviously the best way to learn a language is like immersion, right? Like the best thing is if you go to the country, you have a language course like in the morning till 12, and then you connect to locals in some shape or form. So like if they would have this goal of getting fluent in such a short amount of time, then I would recommend them to go there. And other than this, like it's really their preference. I think, having a language course at the center of your learning journey is important, and then like find side activities that help you to do it. Yeah, like read a book, like watch YouTube videos and stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to do 2 more futuristic sort of questions for you to talk about. I do want people to think about questions. After that, I'll open it up to Q&A, and we'll do questions either for either Felix or I. And then
I didn't get to ask you any question. I thought it was like a conversation.
You can ask me whatever you want.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm messing with you. He didn't send me any questions up front. Yeah.
I've already done my hour on one of these stages doing my bullshit. So actually, I do want to say I do want to ask you what you think is in the future as a first question, like 10 years from now, on your platform or on whatever platform you would be using to learn the next language that you're learning. What do you envision that looks like, right? You already talked about VR a little bit, but like, I mean, where do you see this going?
Yeah.
With technology?
So, like first of all, like from a market point of view, what I think is going to happen, like the language learning business is the money is earned in offline language schools. And it's a really interesting market, the top 5 players make less than 3% of the total revenue or something like that. Like really fragmented, like a hairdresser shop. And I think it's going to consolidate when this moves online. And I don't see any of the offline schools, like being able to do that. I've talked to some players, yeah, and I see what they have done and what they have invested in, and I think like other people like us or like Bubble will do this. And then I think that there's going to be like different spaces, I think there's going to be a really good product like Bubble, like Duolingo for more casual things, and then there might be more premium products where people have the ability to take only one-on-one classes. There will be super specialized B2B classes like LearnShip, and I think it's going to like fragment a little bit. And I wonder if like a language school will win the fight that does everything, or just one thing and does it really well. So that would be interesting. And other than that, I think that there's going to be like a lot of schools will die, like offline language schools. This will happen, I think. They already now like really like feel this. They always they offer a lot of courses, and then like they are being utilized to a certain extent. And then if you don't hit this utilization, so like 3 people sign up, and then with the 4th you start giving the course, and this is like increasingly more difficult to offer those courses. And I think if you as a language school offer 100 courses, the percentage of courses that you actually conduct is going down, and I think people are already like realizing this. And when we started, I think 1 out of 30 classes or so was taught online. I think now it's 1 out of 11 or 12, and then you see where this is going, right? So yeah, so this is going to happen, I think.
This is sort of a side question about that, which is, we see that as a motivational factor with a lot of students, right? Where they want an in-person class to some degree because it's more highly motivating, right? To go to a class and be in person with people. Maybe VR will help change that to some degree, like bridge the gap. I think having the video screen in between people there's a separation there that makes it easier to cancel the class, right? Or like to not show up if you're feeling tired or you're feeling like you don't want to do that. Do you guys see that as well? Do you have some idea of how to get over that sort of motivational barrier, right? That in-person classes do provide to like show up from, I mean, I did like Alliance Française in Paris, and like to show up at 9 o'clock and be there for 3 hours or whatever, like and having that structure, there's like a motivating factor to that that's
Yeah.
hard to do when it's as flexible as
Sure,
we are,
totally.
right?
I mean, it's obviously there's this element of social pressure, right? Like like when you do this online, like probably you're more inclined to stay in bed when you don't feel so good, right? Or you continue to stay with your friends and not go home and have the class. It's much easier to cancel, and people will not judge you. But I think it's also a little bit of an illusion that we can externally like motivate those people, right? Like our customers, they're highly intrinsically motivated, and they have a really clear purpose to do that. Like again, one of our first clients, she was a lady, and she was she was marrying a German husband, and her goal was to learn German, to hold the wedding speech in German and surprise him with that. And she did this in secret, so to say, right? I don't know, this is a very beautiful like reason to learn the language, I guess, but people have very real targets that they want to reach, you know, yeah. And they will find a way, like this is going to be the determining pressure for them to learn.
I mean, it's interesting to compare that to especially Duolingo, I think, that has been very good at trying to figure out how to run around this and externally motivate with gamification, right?
Yeah.
Like having points and
You're right.
rubies and bullshit, right? And it's like, is that, I never know who's in the audience. If there's somebody from Duolingo or Babbel that you can come up and yell at me later. But like, is there some combination of that you think is really valuable to sort of externally motivate and balance that with an intrinsic motivation, you know, of learning a language? Or do you think it's more like it's important that you have this intrinsic motivation to try to learn this language?
Yeah, I think it's really important that you have this intrinsic like motivation, but obviously there's like elements of gamification, but also competition that you know that push you. Yeah. When you have this Duolingo streak, right, and then it's 26, and then it goes down to 0. You know, like of course you're gonna do something. I get, yeah, maybe I take it back what I said earlier. You know, like maybe it's a good combination to have both. Yeah? I think the intrinsic motivation has to be there, but obviously like somebody like Duolingo is doing it really well to engage people.
Yeah. Okay, so my last question, and then we'll open it up. And I hear this a lot as well, as you know, Google comes out with technologies that are better at understanding language or translating language or speaking languages, as you know, AI or in machine learning. And they're starting to have these sort of Babelfish type things where you put like a thing in your ear, right, and you can hear a translation or whatever. Yeah. Like, what do you think about the future of the need to learn a language?
Yes. I mean, there are certain cases where it will be absolutely necessary to do that. Yeah. Again, like being in a romantic relationship, or like even living in the country, you cannot rely on this thing in your ear, right? That has everything with half a second of delay, you know. But I'm also, you know, like everybody is super hyped about this, and I think there's like my perception is a little bit differently. You know, like there was this thing like a couple of years ago where you had like the CD, and on the CD was like a set of vocabulary and then a set of like grammatical rules, and then you know like you could put in text and then it would translate this for you. You know, like it was really crappy and it didn't work so much. And then the next S-curve in this process was that you would take things out of context, you know, and then like look at 10,000 times that this has been used, and then you would like apply the right context and then translate this. This is now what Google Translate is, you know, and it also doesn't work. Yeah, like you can use this a little bit for email or checking like your writing, but like I don't see what the next S-curve is to be fair. But you know, people seem to believe in that, or some people are actually, you know, like more open to this. But I think, you know, like as soon as you live in a country and you have contact, you know, like with the social environment, like you would need to learn this. And I actually also think as soon as you do this in a business context, you need to learn the language, because there's so many like sarcastic nuances in conversations, and these tools they will fail for a long time, I think, before they can see that.
Yeah, I've had that experience of being in Japan and having a translator, like a live translator, in a conference where we were doing some judging or something, like of a pitch competition.
Yes.
And somebody came up with like some cultural reference. And they're like some TV show that everybody in Japan knows, yeah. And she's just like, I I got nothing. Like I don't have time to explain the Friends of Japan to you and like tell you why that's a funny reference and like why this is like important to the thing. That she's just like, just forget it. We'll just move on. Just pretend you didn't hear that.
But maybe like these things they okay like for tourists to do this. Like to order food in a restaurant and something like this. Like the reality is that the language market, which is shrinking anyways, is potentially going to get like a little bit smaller. Like could be.
Why did you say that?
Because like there are certain applications for learning a language, and like maybe you as a tourist like learning a language for the purpose of being able to order food in a restaurant when you visit Spain. Like maybe this is a purpose that it's not so necessary anymore at some point. But it's a small portion. I think it's not gonna like be the core of learning languages. Yeah. I think of this like one more level, like you have Bubble or like a vocabulary trainer, and maybe you have this instant translation thing, like on your phone or so.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. Is thinking about the difference between those business models, right? Of getting people to A1 or something, and that's kind of as far as that technology gets you, and ours, right, which gets you much farther on sort of the in-person spoken language communication thing that. It's kind of fascinating to see, is one of them more replaceable than the other, right? Is it not necessary to learn, if you're only going to get to A1, like why even do that, right? When you can put a thing in your ear and get to that level. But if you want to have romantic relationships, or you want to have, more philosophical conversations with people or about culture, right? Which I think, to me, a lot of language is about culture. And so, like some of it is about communication, but a lot of it is about sharing culture in an interesting way. And that's why I find that I think it would be really difficult for technology to sort of completely replace language learning.
I agree.
But with that, we'll open it up to questions as well for either of us. Does anybody have? Yeah.
I actually have two very business-centric questions, I guess. So you talk about how you don't really focus on externally motivating users.
Well, we send out emails and stuff like this, right?
But like I couldn't agree more that you want to have people that are intrinsically motivated, right? The question that comes to me is like, what do you do to create awareness for those? Like, where do you find those people, right? Maybe there's some marketing people sitting around here. But what's super interesting is like, how do you reach that target group that has the need?
Yeah, I mean this is a job of a whole department, right? And I think it's not something where you turn something on and then you reach them, but it's it's like a progressive thing, like you add more segments to your target groups, and this is how you grow, like a business. I think it makes sense to look for people that are in a special situation where language is required, right? So like obviously somebody who migrated to Germany, like we should talk to him, maybe he wants to learn German, but also somebody who wants to enter university, maybe we should talk to this person too.
Okay, so you do that via targeting, you do that via brand building. How do you?
Well, I think it's you cannot start with one thing, but it's something that's building really organically, and then at some point you have certain intuition or like a certain track record in a certain segment, and then you do more, right? Like you find ways of reaching this target and telling a story that makes them like come to you. Does it help at all? It's like super generic.
You see that it takes time to develop because it's a market.
Sure.
There's lots of going on, and as you guys talked about, there's like this perception of you can learn languages very quickly, and that doesn't help the process because it's not true, right? You have to invest a lot of time, you have to have the right people to actually who have the right intent to learn language. No, it's good to know because like we face that challenge, and it's good to have some feedback from you guys who have been in place now.
Sure. Like I mean, it's a story of failure in the end, right? Like you try 100 things and then like 3 work. I remember that we had this one situation where we were like looking up language schools, like when the course would end, and then we were having like 3 classes when the last lesson of the course was in front of language school. It's really difficult to scale this, and we got actually sued for this. But you can try that,
Try what didn't work for us. The second question I had, if you years ahead, what would you think the distribution between B2C and B2B revenue would look like?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we have a larger audience in B2C, and I mean, there's companies like LearnShip that do B2B really well. We now see, you know, like a lot of people that learn B2C with us, they also, you know, like want to make their company pay for it. Yeah. So I think it will not change to whatever the market is right now, you know, and then it's very specific where you are, you know.
But
like,
for your company specifically, is it gonna, like, is B2B?
Again, like it's like we are operating like in so many countries that it's very, very specific. I think, you know, like talking about Germany, I think we will continue to have like a large client base of private customers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually have two questions. One of them is, at the beginning you mentioned that you started building with RTC and then you went back to Skype that was abandoned. Was it because that was technically hard, it wasn't perfect? Or Skype is just that good, that's why?
No, we didn't go back to Skype. So we started with Skype, and then we had Adobe Connect, and then we had like WebRTC, and then we had Adobe Connect again, and then we went to LearnCube, and then to Zoom. Jesus. And we had things like in parallel. So like it's in the end, like we have built our platform in a way that that the student, well, they do realize it looks different, but you know, like you click the button, join class, and then you're being thrown into a technology, and then we have a way of serving them and measuring this quality, and we just take the one that's the best, and it happened to be that our technology was not the best, and it was a pain to build it, so that's why we changed it.
How do you measure the best in that context? How do you measure the best in that context?
Yeah, this is a good question. This is a reliability score, and like an entire team worked on this for like half a year. And the reality is that it's like different for each technology. So on WebRTC-based technologies, you can measure, you know, like packages lost, times of like people connecting to a classroom. And if you work with a technology, you know, like Zoom, like you cannot get this information. You know, it's hidden from you, and then you have to rely on people reporting this back to you. So it's like a set of many dimensions, and then they are not comparable at all. And you go with your gut feeling.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's the other one.
So just second question: how do you deal with the difference in time zones? Like, do you actually?
Yeah, the developers are grunting. We are not dealing with this. Like, no, like I mean, like it's a solved problem, right? Like with many difficulties. So you can. You should talk to Xander after.
Yeah, it's so just from our perspective on both of those, we use WebRTC exclusively because we have like a turn or stun server that records the video. Like from a lot of our students, we allow them the option to record their sessions and then go back and be able to review them after the fact. Yeah,
that's a really good argument why you should use the technology.
And so that's the only we want more control over the experience, I think, rather than kicking them out. Was there a counter argument? Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and time zones are always just a major nasty bullshit thing. With ours, we let people choose like the times, and then we are slotting tutors separately. So we're not saying this is your tutor and you have to figure out a time. You're saying I want classes at noon every day or whatever. Yeah. And if one of the tutors isn't available, you know, that is your favorite or whatever, we'll find somebody else and like slot them in at that time. And so you're only looking at your time zone and you don't care what the other person's time zone is whatsoever, which is kind of nice. Like being able to separate like the people caring about their, like they only care about their own time zone, which makes things a lot easier, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm the amazing guy who created the curriculum. I wanted to go back to the point of comparing like private classes and group classes, because I really believe that group classes are not even like the same level or can do the same job, but are actually better than private classes in terms of like developing language skills. Because, well, Felix has heard me a lot talking about how I think about learning the language more of as a kind of like using the metaphor of practicing a sport, as opposed to this traditional metaphor of, you know, learning maths and learning the rules and then applying them and then always getting the same result, but more of this kind of thing that you need to practice, that you do it wrong the first time, the second time, the third time, and then at some point you master it and you're the expert, right? And I think in this kind of context, having a group class where you have different people, where you're in a social context similar to the one that where we are right now, you can practice language in a more meaningful way, in which the way that you learn the language and that you use it while you're learning it will already kind of like have this meaningful element to you, because, well, there's plenty of research showing that you only learn stuff insofar as it is meaningful to you, right? Like all this is also why I think all these apps like Babbel, Duolingo, etc. Yeah, for a while they work very well, but then at some point you just forget what you learned if you don't practice and if you don't use it, because it simply means nothing to you, right? And I think if we consider all this, a group class is an environment in which practicing language in this kind of way can actually provide better results.
So I mean, that's interesting. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to like argue exactly, but like it's interesting to think about it from a sports context, like from a sports metaphor, right? Like, is it better to be in a golf class or something with 4 other people for 4 times more time, or with a private instructor where you're working on one very specific thing at a time in this manner, where like you're getting very, very good at like a 4-foot putt and then an 8-foot putt and then whatever, right? And like you're working on these individual things with one person, or spreading that time out but spending more time in a cheaper, like in a way that's more affordable. And I feel like that's not something that research has shown very effectively, that having this sort of one-on-one time with somebody versus more time in group classes, which is more effective, because I mean the total amount of time, like you can get a lot of meaningful feedback, I think, or listening practice or whatever, but if you're in a group or in a class with a bunch of other people, then you're not getting individual feedback or really being able to modify the way that you are reacting to things, or getting your own chance to speak, which is like, that's a lot of what's really difficult about learning a language, right? Is like getting good at speaking as opposed to getting good at like understanding what's spoken. And I see this a lot as well with people where they'll learn something on, especially in the A levels, right? They'll learn something on Duolingo and then go like order something in a restaurant, and then they speak back to them and they're like, I'm completely fucked now. I got no idea what to do at this point. And so like just going through those scenarios a lot, which is hard to do in a group class, right? To like go through these one-on-one scenarios where you're feeling comfortable expressing yourself. But I mean, it's debatable, obviously. Like I'm not saying this is the right thing. I'm saying we are having this conversation internally on like what is really the best use of your time, right? And like how can you get from B1 to B2 or B2 to C1 or something in the most efficient amount of the time that you have in your life. That's interesting.
I mean, if I may reply,
yep.
I think this is just a whole debate between fluency and accuracy, right? Working on your fluency, getting to speak, to get a base where you can actually communicate fast, or actually being able to master the dative or this particular tense or these kinds of things, right? I think for this accuracy part, then maybe private classes are more effective, as you have explained. But in order to be able to kind of like feel comfortable enough to order a coffee at a restaurant, or to have this kind of like small talk conversation in German, I think a context which is almost already social, kind of like a group class, where you use language in a more natural way, because you want to ask people what their opinion is about something, or you want to have a debate about certain topics, right? This is kind of the mentality that is behind the curriculum that I have created with my team. This is I personally think that this is a way in which language is already meaningful, right from the very beginning.
I would add but I would add the question of, like, apart from just looking at it as what is the most effective, I would add, like, what is the least barrier. So I could imagine, like, having a one-on-one session with someone in a language you don't speak, and with the person you don't know over video, is something very scary, right? Like, even if you've done it a couple of times, it still is something where, if there's another priority kick in, maybe I'm going to cancel this, right? So it's something very frightening. And I'm wondering if group lessons, even though I don't think personally that they're more effective than private lessons, would like lead people to do them more, because you don't, as you said at some point, you can do it after work, you don't have to pay as much attention because there's 3 other people.
Which is not a good thing, right? But
at some point we'll talk, right? Like, and you only have a fourth of the attention, but you might be able to actually attend those more, book those more, just because because you feel more comfortable because there's multiple people.
Yeah.
This is another level of thinking about this, because people might just like attend more of those, and then end up being faster in the learning process.
I think it's also about like
less scared.
I think it's also putting people in a real life scenario, because if you think about it, like in real life, you don't have always the same conversation partner, and you don't have always that nice British or American accent in front of you. The truth is, you always have mingled accents. Like you always have like someone to talk to from India, from France, from Germany, from US, from whatever. And I think what I personally like about group classes is really that you get all these accents at once, and you actually need to train your ears and also your adaptation of your speed of the language and all of that to your audience. And I think this is what actually the true values of group classes is throwing you actually into different cultures and being actually able to absorb that cultural differences while learning the language.
It's not a question, right?
I was trying to figure out how to respond as well, because the thing with our platform as well is that because there's this sort of pluggable tutoring thing, like you can have different tutors, and so a lot of our students will have 6 or 8 or 10 different tutors that they go back and forth between, but they're all one-on-one, right? And so like I guess the question is, in a group context, is that better than having one accent that you're dealing with at a time, you know, and getting good at that thing, so that when you do hear it, because when you're having a conversation, you're not talking simultaneously to 3 people, right? Like you have to talk to one, or it drowns out and you can't really hear, even in your native language. But that's, yeah. Anyways, okay. So we have. Oh no. What?
No, about your point. Actually, that was my question before we started talking. About like how do you do scheduling? Because that's something like we have automatized completely. Like, so I'm also working for Lingoda, for everyone who doesn't know. So it's something that we have solved by having a platform that's like providing possibilities for students to book whenever they want classes, right? 3 a.m. on Christmas, as Felix said, and then tutors on the other side having like a platform and like a buffet to pick from, basically, right? And like you were saying, okay, if they don't find their favorite teacher, we are just making the effort to find a new one. So how are you actually scheduling? Is there like a scheduling department? Is it like software?
It's all in software, and our tutors go in and say, here's when I'm available, and then we show that to the students and say there's at least, I think we minimize, like you have to have at least 2 tutors available. So whatever the overlap of all of our tutors that have at least 2 of them available at the same time, then the student can go in and just choose any time in that space, and then we'll find somebody, right? And if we have somebody that they've already favorited, then we'll show them this person, like the Bridget or Pitar or whatever is available at this time, and so we'll ask them first, and then if they say I can't actually do it, then we'll find somebody as a backup. Yeah. Okay, we had another question over here, I think. Nope. Oh yeah.
I have a question. Where do you see the place of language exchange, communicating with native speakers who are not professional teachers in one's language learning journey? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. Do you want to do that?
Do you want to go first? Like,
sure.
you have non-trained teachers, right? And we have
do.
Trained teachers.
We do.
So
we have both.
Yeah.
So we in ours I've seen a lot of students want to do both, right? Want to have classes from both types of people. And also native speakers and non-native speakers for all 4 for different reasons. Native speakers who aren't teachers, a lot of students like, because they're in many cases very laid back, and they're very easy classes to take. And so I think in that idea of this group session, it's very non-stressful, right? Because they're not going to get judged, they're not really going to get corrected that much because they can't really do it. And so it's very conversational and flowing, right? And you just have conversations about stuff. The non-native speakers that are teachers or really like to be teachers are a little bit more strict, but they've gone through the process before, and so they know what to correct, right? And so even if they don't have teaching backgrounds, they've done it, and so they're like, I made this mistake too, and so I'll do this. And some of them are really harsh, and some of them are less so. The teachers that are, like the people that have teaching credentials, are generally have better classroom skills, right, than the ones that haven't, and kind of understand the theory, and whether they're native or non-native doesn't really matter as much because they know they have more teaching theory. And so what tends to happen, because you can go through and say, I prefer this tutor and this tutor and this tutor, is that our more professional students, or the students that really are doing a lot of classes, will balance, right? And so they'll do the hard asses once or twice a week, and then they'll do the easier people a couple of times a week, so that they're constantly having the exposure to this thing, but they can handle it emotionally. That it's not the really difficult person all the time, and it's not the person that never corrects you all the time.
What are you doing with your students?
And so, I mean, that's what we've seen people use our system to kind of balance, right? And say, like, I want this person a couple times, and this person a couple times, and this person because they're fun, and this person because I just want to know what they're doing in their lives, and they'll kind of balance all of this stuff, and they'll use our scheduling system to figure out how to build their own schedule that way.
Yeah. I mean, if it serves the purpose of you taking classes, I think that's very nice and honorable. And if you want to have easy people or like that, and this makes you, take more classes, great. But like we had this discussion actually today, it's like a haircut, like everybody can cut hair, but you want to have somebody who has done this like a lot of times, I think, And like there's a certain, like education that teachers have, and there's a certain perception that anybody can teach this. And I think this doesn't hold true, Like there's a certain process on how you teach things, on how you, like revisit knowledge and then apply this. And teachers are just able to do that. And maybe some natives are, but like not necessarily, I think. Yeah. And then I also I think native teachers are better in general than non-native teachers. Because like even non-native teachers, I spoke to a PhD today for German from Romania, and she has just such a heavy accent, Like I think it makes sense to talk to natives, Does it help?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've seen it, but Duolingo has this league system now, where you get compared to other users on Duolingo.
Yeah.
And based on how many experience points you gather, you either get demoted from like gold to silver, or you get promoted,
yeah.
And so on and so forth. So, what about competitive behavior between students on your platforms?
Yeah.
Do you use that at all?
Yeah, we very minorly do, and we have this sort of following system, and we'll show you the people either in your company, if you're in a B2B account, or that you follow, or that follow you in like a little feed. And we were just having this conversation the other day because Inda, our head curriculum designer, her mom is on the platform learning English and is crazy and like studies a bunch, and everybody internally that's also studying on our platform is trying to beat Inda's mom like all the time, and it's like I put in extra hours to try to beat Inda's mom, and Inda's mom saw that and was like, go fuck yourself. I can study even more than you can. And so nobody can beat Inda's mom, and like we're like, I can't believe how much Inda's mom is really driving us to learn our own language because we really want to beat Inda's mom. So I mean, there is anecdotally this, like I think it is actually a really valuable thing. And when I did Duolingo as well, because I've used Duolingo and Lingoda as well, like I found that actually a very motivating factor, right? Of like seeing somebody and being like, I can do better than them this week, right? And like using that as an external factor that is very motivating, and so I think that it can be really valuable, personally.
Yeah, I can just like add to this that like, do you have this like in smaller social groups? Like a lot of students refer us to other students, and then like within these groups you have like this type of competition and people reminding you to take classes. But like our platform, unfortunately, is something that we haven't come like to do so much yet. I think this is something that we should really do. Yeah.
That's interesting.
You've talked about the upcoming death of the offline language school, and I think you're also in contact with a lot of these offline schools. Do you feel like they feel threatened by you, or are they not yet understanding that?
So every other year I do like a round trip, and I meet like my entire network of offline language schools, and some of them I know personally really well, and some of them not. And it's really scary. Like there were two people actually comparing us. That they were saying to me like, I've seen this all before. Like I'm in the business for such a long time. You're like the learning city. Like you're all gonna die. Like online is gonna die. And then I've seen this change. Like over time. Like people take us more seriously, and at least like for Lingoda, like people also know Lingoda now. Like you can go to any language school, and then typically they know us. So I do think the perception is that is changing, and that people take us more serious now. Yeah, and they are all, the big ones, they invest like a lot of money of building their own platform as well. and it doesn't work so well, I think. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's always hard. Like if you look at any, I think industry where some digitization has disrupted it to some degree, that the larger players are always really bad at being able to catch up. Like media is probably the easiest example to look at, like at any large media house and see how they've like adapted to the digital age, or people consuming media digitally, or newspapers or something like that. Like I think language schools are very similar, like any brick and mortar sort of thing where it's like, okay, we need to hire some nerds to come in and build things. Like they don't give a shit, right? And so like they didn't grow up in that, they don't care about it in that fashion. And so especially the older groups, I think it's really, really hard for them to compete in that manner. But
this is gonna go on YouTube, you know this, right?
Don't worry about that. Sorry. I didn't name names. If anything, I've mostly made fun of well, Lingoda and Babel and Duolingo. Not Lingoda as much, but yeah. Because they're all here. Yeah.
Because we were talking about motivation so much earlier, this is more like a philosophical question. Like in my utopian view of the world, I hope that in future everyone on this planet will be bilingual. But as we know, it's not particularly easy to motivate people to learn a language if they feel they don't need it. For example, the UK, or any other English-speaking country, they're kind of like, why should I learn French if everyone has to speak English anyway? So, in your view, respectively, do you feel that there will be a way, maybe through technology, maybe through a shift in perspective, where we will be able to create motivation for language learners, not just have them like fall in love with someone who speaks a different language, or you know, I don't know.
That's what we see, yeah.
Language learning dating app, but whether you think it would be possible in the future to create motivation for people to learn language.
That's really philosophical. I don't know, you know, maybe, you know, like I think like we might have more free time, you know, in 20 years from now, and you know, we will spend more time with culture, and you know, like cooking is culture, you know, speaking languages is also culture. So maybe this is something, you know, where we spend more time with, you know, like when we have more, you know, like time through automation or something like this. The reality, like a lot of languages are dying, you know, and even my brother and I, who are both like as German as you can be, like we speak English with each other, you know, like I don't know, I don't know if it will be so much necessary in like a lot of context to learn to be bilingual all the time. I don't know. Would be nice, yeah. It sounds like a beautiful idea.
It's a completely utopian idea. It's just, do you think it would be feasible in maybe not in the near future?
Totally, yeah, everybody can learn a language, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I guess my little thing on that is I think people that are natively bilingual or really close to it, like you, for example, like went to school, right, in both of these languages, or had parents that learned both these languages. So from a very early age and for many, many years, for decades, like we're exposed to both of these languages. Like my daughter speaks French very well, but not because she's a really good studier or used Lingoda all the time, but because I mean, not that you can't, I'm saying she's good at it because we put her in school to do that, right? In a moment where she didn't have a choice. She's like, I either learn math in French or I don't learn math, and then I'll get yelled at, and so I might as well learn math in French, and like doesn't think about learning French as like a specific thing. I think it's much easier. Also, I mean, you know, talking about, you know, falling in love and things like this, right? Where it's not a chore, like it's not a goal that you're doing. It's something that you learn because you need to, or because of context or something, or because you're trying to do something other than learning a language as a specific goal. And you know, from my perspective, it's really nice. It's unfortunate that it's not as common in the United States, at least. I think it's more common elsewhere to put your kid in a school that speaks a language you don't speak at home. And I think that is where bilinguals come from a lot, right? Where they're really, really good at it and really didn't have to work at it as much, specifically because it wasn't a goal of theirs. It was a circumstance of their upbringing. And that's very easy to do everywhere, right? It's just getting parents to think that that's an important thing to do, and having the schools around. And in some places that's a thing you can do, and in a lot of places it's not. So, but learning it after the fact, learning German at, you know, 35 is the most unfortunate way to learn German, I think, of all of the different ways.
But you're pretty good now, eh? Like you're good.
Let's not test this right now. We'll have some more wine and then we'll, yeah, wir können in Deutsch reden vielleicht. Okay, yeah.
Talking about children, do you plan at some point to offer some kind of course tailored for children? Is it that in your roadmap at some point?
I mean, this is what a lot of people are talking about at the moment, right? You have these great companies in China popping up, you know, and also like going into other places. I think it's yes, it's really, really interesting. Do we have a curriculum for children right now? No, we don't. But yes, like it's really, really interesting, of course, as a segment.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just quickly, because we were talking about offline school versus like online school. In offline language school, you usually develop like kind of friendship with your colleagues that you're actually learning the language. I've never taken online school, but is this also possible then? Like, do people do that, or it's like just one-on-one? We hang out. That's it.
I mean, for us, you know, it's all one-on-one. I think people do have friendly relationships with their tutors a lot. Actually, there's a couple people here that I know from taking classes, and there have been people at other events and stuff that'll show up, and I'm like, oh my god, like I've spent 30 hours like talking about my kids with you, right? Like that's a very specific sort of bond that you have with somebody. And you see them offline, and it's actually really kind of surreal to like see them in real life. And you're like, this is what you look like in real. You're taller, and so yeah. I mean, I think people do you know, create bonds and become friends and things like that, sort of offline. But in group classes, we don't offer those, so I don't know as much if there's that sort of. I mean, we do find actually that like from that perspective that people won't cancel. Like people will stop using Duolingo or whatever. They have to like, or Babbel, they have to like externally motivate people to keep doing it because you can't let down a computer as much, and so they have to like fake you into thinking you're letting down this fucking owl, and like making him sad, right? And so like with us, I think for both of us, because there are human beings on the other end, if it's scheduled and you know they're showing up, like you don't want to let them down. And so there is a thing like half an hour before you're like, God, I really don't, all right, fuck it. Like I'll do it because I don't want to let, you know, Peter down or whatever. Like he's going to be there waiting and like I need to show up, right? And so like we found as a motivating factor, having human beings involved in the process is just by itself actually a relatively motivating thing.
Yeah, and people sometimes do meeting group classes, yes. So they are somewhat connected socially, and then they say, hey, let's take this class together. Yeah.
Really tiny comment. I do feel bad when I let the raccoon down. He cries when
I know the raccoon. It's so sad. Oh, our raccoon.
Oh, and then the
Wait.
No, I use Chatterbug.
Oh, okay.
When I get the answer wrong.
We make the raccoon cry? Oh, yeah. We don't want to make the raccoon cry. That's a good point. Okay. If we have one more, we'll do one more question and then everybody can drink and talk.
I'm one of the co-founders of Chatterbug.
Alright, you can't ask a question. We'll do one and then two.
Okay. Well, I was curious what other languages, because both companies right now offer German, Spanish, and then soon we'll have French and English, and we have French and English as well. I was curious what other languages you're thinking about and why, or what are the most what's the most popularly requested language that you're not offering right now and would you consider offering it?
That's a good question. I don't. What?
Italian.
Italian, yeah. So I mean, this was one of the ways that we thought about growth very early in the building of the company. But if you look at the reality, you know, like half of the market is English. And then you have the languages that we teach, and then they're growing a little bit, and they're bringing it down. But I think, you know, like us picking 4 languages is probably something that I personally would not do again. Mm-hmm. I think it's really fine if you have one language, and then you do this really, really well. Of course, you think like, I can leverage this technology, and with very little effort, you know, like have this revenue building block. But I think like focus is actually pretty good.
Wait, one more question?
You want it?
Yeah. Wait, that sounded vaguely threatening.
Once you know me, this may be more Felix, I'm not so sure if I want to know the answer to this, but what keeps you up at night in terms of growing the company?
Actually, for me, I think what is the most concerning is the time that it takes to build a curriculum the way that we're doing it, right? Like it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to build out. Sorry, it does, right? Like it's if we wanted to say there's like 10 more languages that we wanted to do, like that's millions of dollars potentially, right? Of all these people that we would need to hire and onboard and train and spend years like building out all this stuff, and it's really difficult. And any new feature that we do, the more like. But I do. So one of the differences I think in the model that we're doing is that my vision, the vision of the co-founders at the time, I think has always been to allow people to trade time, right? So more in a tandem. We actually have a co-founder tandem over here of more of a tandem type thing, but with a curriculum that you can go for. And so we're really trying to make sure that people that don't have teaching backgrounds can teach effectively in some capacity, because then we can bring down sort of the price and make it more affordable and accessible to people. And so the more languages we have, like I think you're right. Like with what we're doing right now, focus is much more important. Like we're much better in German because of the time we've spent in it and what we've invested than the newer languages. But in the long run, the more languages we have, the more people that are in this system that can trade their time to help other people learn their language, right? And so for me, in the long run, that's actually what's really important. And the cost of expanding into these other languages is prohibitive, right? To be able to do that in a shorter time span, or for an affordable sort of deal. Like we can't do 10 languages, right? Like, and so how do you do that in a manner that you still have high quality in everything that you're doing? That's what's really sort of, I think, one of the larger barriers to what my vision of what we want to accomplish in a larger scale is. But now I really want to know what keeps you up at night.
I sleep really well.
Yeah, we yelling at you, not accepting.
No, I don't know. I have a certain attention for detail and like sniff. I think people that work with me, they have like I have this track record maybe, but it's okay. You know, like you see things, report things, they get fixed at some time, and in the end, you know, like what really, you know, like lets me settle is that people are just learning a language, right? And when something goes wrong, you know, and they miss a class because A, B, C, D, we just give them 2 classes and they are really happy, and you know, it's not the end of the world, and it comes to an equation where we are building something, you know, like towards the future that improves every day, but at the same time we found like a thing now that results into people really liking our service. So it's a process, obviously, right? And it can be frustrating, but like I sleep well.
All right, that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for coming out and doing this.